It's close enough. Everybody ready to go on the record? All right, and your name was, ma'am? Okay. All right. Well, let's, before we go on the record, if you have anything that looks sort of like this, if you could make sure that it's either off or muted so that we're not interrupted as we proceed through this hearing. Ah, and I do have your card. Thank you. All right, let's go on the record. Good morning. Today is Monday, December 5th, 2022. Pursuant to notice, this final hearing is being held in Pensacola, Florida, before the Division of Administrative Hearings. I'm Gary Early, the Administrative Law Judge presiding. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. The case before me is Jacqueline Rogers versus Escambia County, case number 22-3224-GM. This case is brought to challenge Escambia County Ordinance, the Escambia County Ordinance, which amends the Escambia County Midwest Sector Plan to remove a parcel totaling 99.45 acres, plus or minus, and amending the Escambia County Comprehensive Plan 2030 Future Land Use Map by assigning a future land use category of mixed-use suburban to that 99.45 plus or minus acre parcel. Petitioner alleges that the ordinance is not internally consistent with the goals, objectives, and policies of the Escambia County Comprehensive Plan as required by Section 163.3177 paren 1 and 2, is not based on relevant data and analysis as required by Section 163.31771F, and is not in compliance as defined in Section 163.31841B Florida statutes. Petitioner has the burden to prove that the issues in dispute are not fairly debatable, and findings of fact must be based on a preponderance of the evidence. This hearing will be governed by Division of Administrative Hearings Procedural Rules, Chapter 28-106, Florida statutes, and the Florida Administrative Procedures Act, Chapter 120, Florida statutes. So with that, could I have the parties make their appearances, starting with the petitioner?
Should I stand or?
No.
I'm Jacqueline Rogers, the petitioner.
All right. And for Escambia County?
Steve West with the County Attorney's Office.
All right. All right. Couple of preliminary matters. As you know, you probably know, I know Ms. Rogers, you've been through these proceedings before. Hearsay in a Chapter 120 proceeding is admissible, though it is not sufficient in and of itself to support a finding of fact unless it's corroborated by other admissible evidence that would be admissible over objection in a civil trial. Therefore, I intend to admit hearsay evidence. I will give it the weight that it merits once it's in the record. If you have an objection and you want to preserve the record and note that it is hearsay, feel free to make the objection. I'll be overruling it, but you know it's good to have it in the record to mark the spot. In addition, if something is hearsay but it's being admitted for something other than the truth of the matter asserted, please point that out, because then it's not hearsay. Or if it comes under an exception to the hearsay rule, please point that out as well, and I'll make a ruling as to the extent that it is hearsay or not hearsay. Second, as set forth in the order of pre-hearing instructions, I intend to take official recognition of all statutory law, rules, resolutions of the Florida legislature, rules promulgated by governmental agencies, and published in the Florida Administrative Code, agency final orders, and duly enacted ordinances and resolutions of Florida municipalities and counties. I have taken official recognition of that, so if there are any of those things you want to rely on as we proceed, or in your proposed orders in this case, don't feel like you have to file a motion for official recognition. I think I have one motion to supplement respondents' disclosure of exhibits, which is a Comprehensive Plan Amendment Compliance Evaluation. It was filed on December 1st, so I don't have a response, although Ms. Rogers, I think in the pre-hearing stipulation, you did identify one exhibit that was filed after the deadline for filing. I don't know if this is that
No,
exhibit.
That's an additional one that was filed even after that, so
All
I'm
right.
objecting to both of them.
All right. Mr. West, can you tell me what these are and what role they'll be playing in this case? And then I'll make a ruling, and I'll probably have some additional questions, Ms. Rogers, for you. Mr. West?
Yes, Your Honor. One of our expert witnesses, Ken Metcalf, prepared a report that we would like to enter into evidence. He will actually testify here today. So the report is to help supplement the evidence that will be provided, and he can do that orally if necessary. He prepared a draft, and that was the only document that was available at the time of the filing deadline last Wednesday. And so we filed a draft, and then the next morning when the report was available, we filed the motion to supplement with the final report, which is actually shorter. The alternative is, if you're not willing to consider the final report, even though it was a few hours late, he can testify to fill in the gaps and the refinements that he made on the final report, and we'll rely on the draft. I think the other thing that Ms. Rogers is referring to is that the draft was provided to her within the timelines set forth in the pre-hearing order, but I think she's thinking that she's entitled to receive it by 5 o'clock, which is the filing deadline for the DOA clerk. So I think that's the objection that she has, but I don't want to speak for her. She can certainly address it.
So it was filed at some point after, on that date after 5 o'clock?
That's correct.
All right, Ms. Rogers?
The first report, there's two.
This is the draft? I guess there's
The
a
draft,
draft
okay.
report and a final
Right,
report.
so the
okay.
draft was sent to me, I believe, I have the email here, at 11:30 at night when I was asleep. You know, that was the disclosure deadline that we were supposed to exchange our deadline. So, you know, if I knew that I could work throughout that day too and come up with some more exhibits, I probably would have done that too. So that was my objection on that it didn't make the DOA deadline, or even the local deadline, you know, because we're an hour behind. Of course, the regular one was disclosed to me on the 30th. That was 9 days after the deadline to disclose exhibits to each other. So, and there are substantial changes in the report. He says it's shortened, but he's added exhibits to it. He's added exhibits, and he's changed his analysis in there.
Okay. Are these exhibits that were not available prior to the disclosure of the final report?
Even with the late one on the 21st that came at, you know, around 11:30, or I'd have to check the time, but that, yeah, they were not in there. So there's about 4 other exhibits internal in his report that he added.
All right. All right. I think I'm inclined to allow the draft report at such time as it's offered. I'm not going to exclude it based on a filing deficiency. I think filing is 5 o'clock in Tallahassee at the clerk's office, but unless you can tell me how you're prejudiced, I mean, I understand you'd like to have some more time, but unless you can convince me that you're prejudiced in allowing it to come in, I'm inclined at such time as it's offered to overlook the deadline, since it was filed on the same date.
I guess the prejudice would be that if I had known I had that same time, you know, constraint, there was a lot more that maybe I could have refined on my end also.
Okay. All right. I think I'm going to allow the draft in. The final is when did you say the final was filed? Was that
The
on
final
first?
was filed the next morning after the filing deadline, because the DOA clerk's office wouldn't accept anything after the 5 o'clock deadline.
When
But
did
it was
Ms.
provided to
Rogers get the
Ms.
file?
Rogers that day, within a matter of minutes after the deadline.
And Ms.
Nine-
Rogers, you would have the same objection
It
that
was
you
9
didn't
days
have.
after the that we were supposed to, I was already working on the draft report.
Right.
I didn't know it was a draft, but I was already working on the report, and then, 9 days later, I get a new report with new information, significant, I think, in some areas, changes, on opinion.
All right. I'm going to withhold ruling on the final report. I'll allow the author in their testimony to discuss the changes. If they're substantial, I may not give them much weight, but at least I'm going to give you an opportunity to cross-examine and parse out what might be the changes and how they would be different from the first draft that you had, more or less timely. So I'm going to withhold ruling on the final. So, Mr. West, I think you'll need to have the author testify as to what the changes might be and the extent to which they're substantial or not.
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
I have a question, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
If wouldn't be allowed to use it as an exhibit, if, potentially, would he be allowed to still testify orally to what he would have put in the exhibit?
I think, yes. I mean, he's going to be allowed to offer testimony, and if his testimony is that there are elements of the draft report that he no longer stands behind, then he can do that. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with other exhibits. I'm a little more bothered by that. If they were exhibits that weren't disclosed earlier and timely in accordance with the order for pre-hearing instructions, I'm likely to exclude them. If they're in the record already, if they've been disclosed and now he's referring to them, it's still a little problematic, but I'll at least give it some thought at that time.
Okay.
So, all right. I've received the joint pre-hearing stipulation. It looks like the parties spent some time on this, and I'm appreciative of that. I have gone through, I'm not sure exactly the significance of it yet, but I see that you have excluded certain paragraphs in your petition, so I've marked them on my copy, and I'm sure that you'll be able to explain to me as we go through this. The elements. I'm going to take evidence today, and whatever evidence I receive today will be the basis for my recommended order. And then I have a list of exhibits, and those that are objected to. Do the parties want to introduce the exhibits that are not that have no objections at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. That would be my preference, is that of those that are stipulated between the parties, is acceptable that we would not have to go through the formal process of entering them into evidence. So if we may consider those as entered, that would speed things up, I think.
All right. I'm big on efficiency, so let me start with,
And, Your Honor, the only other objection I had was for their Exhibit 5, I believe, based on hearsay, but since you said you were going to admit it, I'm fine with that.
okay. Yeah, I mean, notes of a conversation, I mean, that's almost double hearsay. I mean, it's a hearsay document that's relating matters that would of themselves be hearsay. So how much weight I'll ultimately give that is going to be, somebody's going to have to convince me that there's some non-hearsay evidence to corroborate the substance. But if you've withdrawn your objection to 5, so you have no objection to any then of respondents 1 through 21?
Correct.
All right,
Well,
so,
no, 20, I still have an objection to 21, which is, that's
oh, okay, 21 is the
the draft.
is the draft?
Yeah, and would you be replacing with the second one?
No,
or
I'm going to,
It'd be additional, okay.
it'd be
So
additional. So
21
I
and-
have
21
21
and
would be the
22.
draft, and then 22 would be the final. Okay. All right, so without objection, Escambia County Exhibits 1 through 20 are received in evidence. And I'm going to withhold ruling on 21 and 22, which are comprehensive plan amendment compliance evaluation prepared by Kenneth Metcalf with attachments and exhibits. 21 being the draft, 22 being the final. And I'll withhold any ruling on those two exhibits until such time as they are offered in evidence during, I presume, Mr. Metcalf's testimony. And then petitioners' exhibits 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37 are all received in evidence. I will note that some of those are provisions of either ordinances or statutory law, so they're also subject to official recognition, but it doesn't hurt to have them in. So all of those petitioners' exhibits that I have referenced are received in evidence, and I'm withholding ruling on 3, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 21, 22, and 30, and 38. All right. Anything else that we, do the parties anticipate a transcript will be ordered?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, so we'll discuss the timing elements of that, but it helps me to know that I'll have a transcript. I do tend to take fairly copious notes, so if I'm looking down through parts of this proceeding, I promise I'm paying attention. But I like to have, you know, it was one of those things from law school for some reason, that if I wrote things down as verbatim as I could, they tended to imprint a little bit better, so it helps me to take notes, and I typically do. All right, anything else that we need to take up on a preliminary matter before we start taking evidence?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Oh, and I do see that the parties have stipulated to the expertise of 4 witnesses. Looks like 3 of the, let me find it. I set down my pre-hearing step too soon. Where did I put it? There it is. All right, so I have stipulated expertise for Andrew Holmer, Allison Lindsay, Terry Malone, and, I'm sorry, was it Albrecht? Who was the other, Ms. Rogers, who was the other expert that the stipulation, because I believe it was one of yours.
I didn't believe that we had stipulated to any of them, Mr. West.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought I read that there were the expertise.
I have expert witnesses, but we didn't stipulate, I don't believe.
All right. Give me 1 second, please. Yeah, I have facts admitted that will require no proof at hearing. Paragraph 3 indicated that Horace Jones, Allison Lindsay, Terry Malone, and Andrew Holmer are experts in the field of planning, zoning, and growth management in accordance with the Escambia County Land Development Code. Is that
I have no objection to that. There's staff here, that's fine.
okay? All right. So then for those 4 witnesses, then we don't need, I'll accept by stipulation that they are experts in the field and qualified to explain some of the facts to me in a manner that I can better process them. And I will receive them as experts in the field of planning, zoning, and
I
growth
have no objection
management,
to that.
and
There's
will
staff
accept
here.
their
That's fine.
testimony in the
Okay.
form of opinion. All right.
All
So
right.
then for those four witnesses, then we don't need, do we have some feedback coming through?
Yes, Your Honor, I don't know, I think that might be distracting. I don't know if we have somebody who can,
Okay. Oh, okay, it's done. We got it. All right. Anything else on a preliminary matter that we need to take up before we start taking evidence?
no, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Rogers?
No.
All right, would either party like to make an opening statement before we get going?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, Ms. Rogers?
So thank you, Your Honor, for the opportunity to address the court today. I petitioned the court because I believe that I will prove today by testimony and evidence that this land use change, this comprehensive plan change, was done without Escambia County bringing the data and analysis required by Florida Statute 163-3177 to support this change. In fact, Development Services staff didn't really feel like they needed to do the data and analysis for this amendment. This comprehensive plan amendment involves a removal of 2 parcels from a long-range plan of Escambia County, the Midwest Sector Plan. Adopted over 11 years ago, this plan sought to bring about some innovative planning to the central part of Escambia County to direct growth to the new rural area in an orderly fashion and to prevent sprawl, while still providing some rural character of the community, still preserving, rather. Unfortunately for the citizens, the sector plan has become somewhat of a political football at this point. At least one pro-development commissioner has pushed for not the complete removal of the sector plan, as it gave increased development rights to larger developers on previously rural and agricultural lands, but these opt-out requests have been pushed in the low-density areas of the plan, natural resource protecting, habitat preserving, and environmentally sensitive areas of the plan in the conservation neighborhood land use areas, where these subject amendments are. By slowly chipping away at the sector plan piece by piece, unsupported opt-out, by politically directed but unsupported by true data and analysis, comprehensive plan amendments, Escambia County will eventually render this plan useless, which will be a loss to many residents and all the taxpayers, as Escambia County has already invested over $1 million, is the last I heard, into developing and implementing this plan. So as a pro se petitioner, I've lacked the ability or the resources to retain lawyers or professional planners in appealing these unsupported plan amendments. So why am I here today? This plan, these subject properties are literally in my backyard. I would be substantially negatively affected by this unsupported plan amendment, which I believe, and I intend to prove today, is a truly bad decision. So the area of the subject amendments lacks the facilities and services to support such a change, and it would be harmful to the environment and nearby natural resources to have this increased density and intensity on these parcels. And it would undermine the ability of those properties remaining in the conservation areas like our neighborhood to achieve the goals and objective of this land use as it's stated in Chapter 16, which is the sector plan chapter in the Escambia Comprehensive Plan. And it would also go against the goals and objective of the detailed specific area plan that was adopted as a plan amendment as well. So I believe, Your Honor, that I will show today that Escambia County did not do the full data and analysis intended to support this planning decision. And when significant data and testimony was available to them, they ignored it. And they deferred true analysis until after development. They intended to defer true analysis until after development rights of this much more dense and intense future land use was already granted. Escambia County has no currency provisions for roads, has no concurrency, I'm sorry. It has no school concurrency or recreation concurrency provisions. There are no impact fees to fund these facilities. Therefore, it is essential that we get it right and make these important comprehensive plan changes, it's essential that we get it right when we're making these essential comp plan changes, especially future land use map amendments. As DEO and the state agencies, the Department of Economic Opportunity and the state agencies no longer have the authority to comment or oppose actions that don't impact important state facilities or resources, the burden of challenging these unsupported plan amendments unfortunately falls on the citizen, which I'm sure this court can appreciate as a burdensome task. And in Escambia County, it's unfortunately fraught with a lot of political opposition and attack. Escambia County has the staff and the money to hire an outside consultant to come in after the fact and try to quickly do the data and analysis that they never think that they need to do here until they're challenged. And that is exactly what happened here. But as I feel I will prove today, even that effort was inadequate and erroneous. I believe that I will show today through exhibits and testimony that Escambia County did not react appropriately to the data already available to them. They ignored testimony at hearing, and they failed to truly analyze the maximum effects that this future land use assignment could cause. The county had already scrutinized data and analysis from when the sector plan and the detailed specific area plans were adopted. That was already scrutinized by the DCA and the DEO later on. And the county failed to bring any alternative data to show, in this case, in this plan amendment, why this change is appropriate or any valid planning reason for this amendment. I believe that this court, in the end, will conclude that based on the testimony today and the exhibits, and that Escambia County Ordinance number 2022-38, amending the comprehensive plan, is not in compliance as that term is defined in the Florida statute. Thank you.
All right, Mr. West, would you like to make an opening, or you can certainly reserve if you would like?
Yes, Your Honor, I'd prefer to reserve that opportunity until we put on our case.
All right. All right. Well, with that, Ms. Rogers, you having the burden, you go first, so you may call your first witness.
Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness, Barbara Albrecht, please.
Okay, Ms. Albrecht. I think we've decided you'll be sitting right up here. And if I could have you remain standing.
Sure.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your full name, please.
Barbara Birgit Albrecht.
All right, please be seated. It's a little awkward having you in front of your, of Ms. Rogers, but hopefully the,
Excuse me, to make it sit back here too, if you want. What about you sit right there, please?
I will do whatever you would like me to do.
however you want to do it. I'm not inconvenienced a bit, but, I'll tell you what, if you can move that table back, maybe just so that the witness will be a little more in line with each of the parties, unless it's going to be pulling wires. Now it looks like it's going to be yanking
Yes, sir,
wires.
there's only so
Okay.
far we can,
Can we move
Okay.
that microphone so I can?
yeah, let's do that.
All right.
We can scoot it back a little bit.
We'll figure it out. Don't worry about, it's probably more important that you face Ms. Rogers or Mr. West when you're responding to questions. Actually, it's more important that you face Ms. Owens.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Ms. Odom. But we'll figure it out.
Where would you like me?
That works. I think we can all hear. All right.
Excuse me, Your Honor, could you state your name for me?
Yes, I'm Judge Gary Early. Just like early in the
EAR?
morning.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And as we go through, I over my time as an ALJ, I do, since I'm a finder of fact, I always take my role in knowing what the facts are seriously. So I may once in a while jump in with a question of my own. I'll try not to step on your questions and disrupt things, but I may or may not have questions as we go through. All right, Ms. Rogers?
Okay, good morning. Would you please state your name for the record?
Sure. Barbara Birgit Albrecht.
Ms. Albrecht, can you please tell the court where you're currently employed?
Yes. So I receive a paycheck from the University of West Florida. I work in the Center for Environmental Diagnostics and Bioremediation, and I do water quality sampling and work.
Okay, so what positions or jobs do you have at those places? Did that pretty much cover it, or?
So I work in the field, and I take students out in the field and collect water quality data, basically to have a better understanding of the health of our waters. I go to a lot of inland areas, so small communities, little branches, creeks, streams that flow into rivers and carry all kinds of biological and chemical information with them. Right now, I'm finishing a report for an intensive 7-month study where I was collecting data from the upper watersheds in southern Alabama. So up in the Perdido area, up in the Escambia-Conecuh River watershed, and the Yellow Shoal.
And before your current positions, can you briefly discuss your employment history? If we could put up Petitioner Exhibit 1. That's your.
Sure. So I have a pretty vast history. I wear many hats. I have worked with academia, business, government, and NGOs. I have a true love for aquaculture, which deals a lot with water quality. So I've worked with rearing freshwater prawns, but also basically hobby fish. I worked with the EPA, culturing a lot of bioassay organisms, and actually then use them for testing. We call that dose them, kill them, and count them. I've worked for consulting firms where I've chased chemicals that basically originated on land, got into the groundwater, and moved their way through wetlands. I have a background in aquatic toxicology. I've worked for a group called CTEC, the Society for Environmental Toxicology and Chemistry, and helped oversee water quality issues in the U.S. in different regions, EPA regions. Worked with a lot of NGOs. In fact, I inherited one in 2010. And I try, through my background, to educate young people, whoever is interested in the environment, how all these pieces and parts fit together. I basically see that we have a beautiful community here in Northwest Florida. I've been a resident for 40 years, and we're kind of taking the environment for granted, which is one of the reasons I'm here today testifying, because the sector plan was a really wonderful approach for protecting our sensitive lands and our rural communities, but most importantly, our waters.
Could you briefly describe, Ms. Albrecht, your educational background?
Mm-hmm. I have a Bachelor's of Science from Marine Biology from the University of West Florida. So it's kind of funny because I am working in the same building that I graduated from in '87, and I'm sure there's still DNA from me in the building. But yeah, so I still work with the university. I work with students. This nonprofit that I inherited, the Brim Fishermen Association, they've been around for 50 years, and I inherited them in 2010. So part of that process was maintaining a water quality sampling program that we had. So I take students out in the field, show them how to sample, how to be safe, and we come back to the lab and analyze our work.
Okay, so you mentioned the Brim Fishermen Association. Are there other organizations or professional organizations that you're involved with?
I like to cross-pollinate, so I work with Audubon, I work with the Native Plant Society, number of schools. You know, education has a hard time with field trips these days. A lot of hoops to jump through. So we bring science to students in different areas. I served as the board for the Francis M. Weston Audubon Society, which is our local chapter, and their conservation chair for 8 years. I, after Hurricane Ivan moved through this area, and we were having the economic downturn, and a lot of people I knew, young people, were looking for work in the environment. I helped start up the Florida Association of Environmental Professionals again, because we had like a 2-year lull hiatus. I serve on a number of boards. We have a new estuary program in this area that we're very excited about, which we hope will address a lot of water quality problems. And I've served on the technical committee for the Bay Area Resource Council, which recently, within the last 2 years, morphed into this estuary program. So I pretty much have worked in a lot of different arenas within this area.
Have you ever testified as an expert witness in a DOA hearing before?
I have. I've testified twice for the sector plan that we're talking about today.
Okay, Your Honor, I would like to tender Ms. Albrecht as an expert witness in the area of conservation biology, aquatic ecology, and water quality concerns.
Okay.
No objection.
Conservation biology, aquatic
Ecology,
ecology, and what was the third?
water quality concerns.
And you have no objection, Mr. West?
That's correct, sir.
All right. I think, given Ms. Albrecht's experience and education and training over the years, I'm satisfied that she meets the standards for qualification to be an expert established in section 90.702, and I will thus allow her to testify in the form of opinion.
Thank you, Your Honor. So, Ms. Albrecht, did you participate in any of the community visioning meetings for the establishment of the Escambia Midwest Sector Plan? And if you did, in what capacity?
I did. As somebody that works in this arena, it's exciting when you have a large-scale project where you're looking at the landscape holistically, and that's exactly what the sector plan kind of laid out. Today we're talking about a smaller parcel within, but basically the area from Interstate 10 north to the Alabama border would have an overlay on the Perdido River watershed portion, which is exciting because we in Northwest Florida have a lot of natural lands, but a lot of them have been sliced and diced and are sprawling. And so this was an opportunity to look at the lay of the land, the topography, and actually recognize how the land drains and how swamps and creeks and branches basically come together and protect those areas. So it was an area that had conservation was in the forefront as opposed to being an afterthought.
So you attended meetings and
There were probably, I think I made it to maybe 3, 4, 5. I mean, we all had to sign in, so I'm sure there's sign-in sheets floating around somewhere. But it was exciting because it was really a Cadillac plan for this area.
so because of your involvement, do you think it would be accurate to say that the county has invested a lot of time and resources into making the plan come about?
They have. I mean, that's the thing with plans. It's like if you follow them, you may see the benefits, especially long-term range plans like this. I mean, this is a good chunk of land. And a lot of it is difficult because it's in private hands, but the concept, this overlay, was beautiful because it allowed wildlife corridors, it kept buffer zones, it moved the density of the landscape to high and dry areas versus low areas. And, basically it was a nice trajectory for our area. I believe Escambia County, they selected a great planner. They had an excellent planner, a guy named Lloyd Kerr, who ran the department, and he saw the value of long-range planning. And he hired this firm, and they had incredible open meetings and stakeholder involvement and positive information as far as making community centers and what do you need there, and keeping sprawl out of these low-lying areas, which is, we never have enough money to fix the problems that I see on the ground. And so it's like, okay, we can mitigate this by avoiding it. So
I'm sorry.
Let me ask, so the original sector plans were in 2011?
but
And that's kind of the holistic approach you're referring to in your testimony, was that original planning?
yeah, it's sort of a
window.
concept of like, I'll turn it into a human response. Instead of starting smoking, maybe it's better to never start. So instead of building in these low-lying areas, perhaps we can design a community that keeps the integrity of the landscape and the community together. And so the sector plan, the final came out in 2011, but I think we had probably 3-4 years worth of work and meetings, and we could see how they were layering all the different information, how many schools would be in this area, how big would the state grow. And keep in mind, or I don't know where you were in 2004, but this area, we had Hurricane Ivan, and Ivan was a direct hit. The next year we had Dennis, and then we had Katrina, which was huge on a much bigger scale. But we were in a situation where we had an opportunity to kind of look at the larger landscape. It was exciting.
Okay.
Thank you.
You weren't the only environmental person that participated in the visioning
Oh, no.
meetings?
Oh, no, there were lots of, we had a lot of colleagues. After Hurricane Ivan, during this process, I was working for the Nature Conservancy, so we were looking at large-scale landscapes and looking at, how to protect our resources. And we get 66 inches of rain here a year, and sometimes it comes down in what they call frog stranglers, really heavy downpours. So you really start looking at how water flows when you're in my line of work and what that water carries with it. So this was an opportunity to actually design forward, especially this part of the county has a lot of timber resources. Now, fast forward 2022, we had the oil spill in 2010, and the Navy Federal Credit Union set up a campus that's going to employ 10,000 people. So that pushed a housing need, which is what's kind of, in my opinion, slicing and dicing this really good overlay of what we have in the area.
So since your expert qualification is in water quality also, what do you see as, we're going to get to the specific subject amendments. They're located in the conservation neighborhood. You're familiar with that land use and the sector plan. What do you see the environmental benefits of maintaining conservation neighborhoods?
So if you keep areas open and you allow like the native vegetation to survive, maybe don't mow your grass, an inch, but maybe let it grow a little taller, all of those help in these big rain events that I just mentioned, capturing water, acting as stormwater, slowing water, taking up nutrients, collecting sediment. So it has, open areas have a really big benefit, and especially in the Perdido watershed, which is a relatively lower lying area, and so which is another reason why it hasn't been developed before now, is that it's basically a lot of low-lying timber type areas that are prone to flooding. and a lot of little creeks meander through that area. So when you're driving on the road and you like go down into a dip, that's usually a creek. And the way we cross these creeks, we're causing harm to our water resources because they become little pinch points. We like to culvert things, we should be bridging them. And so we're constricting them. And when you build in density, and I'm talking like a lot of pavement, rooftops, driveways, swimming pools, whatever, sidewalks, streets. Whenever you pave that and you get this incredible amount of rain, 66 inches a year, everything that's in the way of the water becomes picked up in that water, and it becomes stormwater. So if you have open areas and this water can go there and slow down and soak in, that's a good thing. And we haven't really done that kind of planning, but that's what was so exciting about the sector plan. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this. We're looking into the future for future growth that also protects the resources. So
I'm going to bring up, or if you could bring up, please, petitioner exhibit 11. I don't know if this was one of the ones that was objected to. Do I do a basis
I'll
for it?
tell you.
now?
11 was objected to, yes.
Okay, so what do I do with it? Do I tell you why I wanted it to use it? Or?
I think the objection was relevance. So, yeah, if you want to explain how this would be relevant to my evaluation of the
Sure.
current
Okay,
opt-out.
Okay. And do that for
provision.
each one that's objected to, just tell you what the relevance is, okay. The first, I just wanted to show the first page is the Department of Community Affairs. It's their objections, recommendations, and comments report, or their ORC report. If you go to page 18, and this is where I think you'll see the relevance here. When Escambia County adopted their sector plan, or their comprehensive plan, they also adopted their sector plan, so that's why it's combined here. I put on page 18 is the optional sector plan conceptual overlay plan, so that's the sector plan, basically.
Okay. Mr. West? You maintain your objection to relevance?
Yes, Your Honor, this is all done as part of the extensive data analysis that was done as part of the sector plan adoption process, but at this point, it's already in place. So I don't know, I don't see any relevance in bringing this in now.
I think I'll overrule the objection. I mean, it does deal with the, I understand it may be part of the data analysis that that was developed for the 2011 adoption, but it may have some relevance. I'm not sure what it might be at this point. We're pretty early on in this proceeding, so how it may tie in, I'm not sure. I'll go ahead and receive Petitioner's Exhibit 11 give it the weight that it merits as we proceed through this matter. So Petitioner's Exhibit 11 over objection is received in evidence.
Okay, Ms. Albrecht, if you look at page 18, under the objections, I don't know if you can read from that screen. Can you not? You could read off my screen because I could see.
okay. So the objection at the bottom. Sorry,
It's fine.
I apologize, Your Honor.
Yeah, and the document's going to speak for itself. I don't need to have it read to
Okay.
me. I mean, if you can just
Can I
identify
explain the context of it?
if you can identify, and she can explain the context, but identify the paragraph so it's clear in the record which paragraph we're looking at, and then
Perfect.
I can read it.
Okay. On page 18, under the objections there,
And let me note, page 18. When you say page 18, the actual number on the page is 15. So I assume we
Correct.
have some title pages that aren't numbered or something of
Correct.
that sort.
correct. So this is 18 in my Exhibit 11.
Yep.
There's an objection where the DCA had said that some of the land uses weren't suitable for the extensive presence of floodplains and wetlands and the native habitat. They mentioned in the paragraph it says, well, you don't want me to read it, but it says the regional employment districts, neighborhood centers are not suitable for these designations due to the wetlands. So, let's see how I'm going to ask the question, since you can't read it. Since the heavy commercial uses that were the objection in the paragraph 29 would also be allowed under this change to mixed-use suburban, in your opinion, do you think it's appropriate to allow land use changes where these subject properties are now? The similar land use changes?
So, okay. I believe that the landscape and the low-lying areas were recognized in the original sector plan analysis as having some of these sensitive areas. So that's, again, what got us so excited. So I mentioned that I was working with a lot of large landscapes and kind of a holistic approach to addressing contamination, water quality concerns. And so by recognizing that there are low-lying areas within this location within Jack's Branch, which is the sub-watershed that it belongs to, yes, I mean, we were excited because it's like, stay out of the low-lying areas, move to the higher areas, increase density there so that you level everything out, but just lower what you have as far as density concerns in areas that are prone to flooding, prone to carrying the stormwater that we just talked about.
So in this document, DCA went on to say that they were concerned about the drainage to the basin that you mentioned that goes out to the Perdido River. Can you tell me about what you know about the Perdido River and why that would be important to consider?
Sure. So the Perdido River is important for a number of reasons. It is basically the boundary line between Alabama and Florida. It is also considered an outstanding Florida water, which is a designation that the State Department of Environmental Protection gave it back in the 70s. And it feeds into a bay called Perdido Bay, and Perdido Bay has some real tremendous problems with pollution from activities having to do with a paper mill. But at this point, you have an outstanding Florida water, and it even has another designation, so lots of titles, lots of layering to sort of protect it, but we're not doing a very good job of protecting it. So the state also considers it waters with special designation. So and the Perdido is a beautiful, wild and scenic river. I mean, Alabama has done a really stellar job as far as putting 24,000 acres along the riparian zone, the area that tends to get wet when we have a lot of rain events or tropical events. And Florida, in the south end of the river, so below, I think one segment is above the interstate, but most of it below, the Northwest Florida Water Management District has put a lot of that area into protection. So we have some of the waterway protected, but you know, everything that happens in our estuary starts upland, inland, and on the land. And so it's important that we protect these buffers, these little feeder creeks that basically start and flow into the river eventually from also being protected, because they're very sensitive and biologically they're exciting. So thank you.
Okay, so if you go to the bottom of the recommendation, the DCA is asking the county to revise the map to ensure the maintenance of water quality and quantity and protection of native habitat. So in your opinion, is it important to preserve land as open space for water quality. Is that important to you?
Absolutely. Buffers are important, riparian zones are important, wetlands, marshes. They're important for our water quality. And if we care about seafood, because pretty much everything that we like to eat spends a part of its life cycle in these areas.
Okay, so I know that you've probably read through this, and since we can't read them here, in your opinion, from this document, do you think that the state was concerned when Escambia County was making the sector plan? They took the concerns of the environment and the natural resources into account when they were designating land uses?
They did, and that's again why we were so excited about it. Kent Wimner, who is Defenders of Wildlife, he's out of Tallahassee. He would come over for a lot of the meetings, and a lot of my biological colleagues and whatnot also would go to these meetings. And again, it was exciting to see that we were projecting, thoughts about growth, how to, I grew up in Miami, so Miami is sprawled, and the poor Everglades have been encroached upon. And I didn't understand it then, of course I understand it now, but I see that growth, that momentum is coming into our area, which is fine. I'm not against growth, but, really good planning is wonderful. And we unfortunately don't do a very good job of that, in my opinion, and it's reflected in our waters. We have water quality problems. So, instead of protecting these sensitive areas, this outstanding Florida water, my goodness, why allow this slicing and dicing of the landscape to accommodate growth that could be placed in a place that could be, that could flood? I mean, my goodness, people spend a lifetime buying a house, so you don't want them to lose their biggest investment.
Okay. I think I'm going to go outside of this document then, since. If you could look at, if we could bring up Petitioner Exhibit 12, is that one also? No, that one's not objected to.
And 12 is in evidence.
Okay, this is, you mentioned Lloyd Kerr. He was the certified planner that was the director or bureau chief at the time. This is a growth management agenda from March 17th, 2011, when Escambia was finalizing the land uses for the detailed specific area plan, or the DSAP, before it was eventually approved in September. So if you look at the bottom of page 1, you can see that's pretty good.
Right.
On to page 2.
Mm-hmm.
Especially on page 2. Did the county do a site analysis to determine what the boundaries of the sector plan would be, considering the extent and location of natural resources from what you've read in this document?
They did. Lloyd Kerr had, after Hurricane Ivan, which again really impacted our area, Escambia County was going to be replacing 55 bridges. And so I met up with him as soon as I got information about that, to talk to him about how we cross waterways, whether they're branches, whether they're streams, whether they're creeks, whether they're ephemeral or year-round. And we were both on the same page as far as spanning these low-lying areas. So I felt like I had met somebody that had common interests in habitat and water quality and all the things that I value.
All right, let's bring up, please, Petitioner Exhibit 10. I think that was objected to. This is an October 2011 letter from the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission.
All right, and Mr. West, you have a relevance objection to
It's
10?
the same objection, Your Honor. It's relevant, is not apparent. All of this has been done as part of the adoption process, but that occurred more than 10 years ago. We're dealing with an issue that occurred recently. So all these old documents, they have a lot of the data and analysis that was considered way back then, but I'm not sure what the relevance is to this particular case before you.
Okay. All right, I think for the same reason I explained with regard to 11, this does appear to be related to the Midwest Sector Plan, albeit the original adoption in 2011. I'm going to receive it in evidence, and the parties are invited to tie it into something that I'll be considering with regard to the 2022 opt-out ordinance. But I will receive it in evidence. So over objection, Petitioner's Exhibit 10 is received in evidence.
Okay, so on that page, I'm not sure if you can read that one either, but this specifically talks about the conservation neighborhoods, which is where the subject properties of this amendment are in. It talks about the conservation neighborhood, and it says there that a key component is, can you read that or not?
I can,
Go ahead.
I
and read
can.
that. Go ahead and read
So-
that real quickly.
You're asking me under the
Conservation
conservation.
neighborhoods, yeah.
Okay, conservation neighborhoods is described in section 3.03, have the potential to affect large upland areas. A key component of that is at least 50% will be designated as undivided, permanently protected open space, managed for either agriculture or conservation purposes, and on which the underlying development rights of the open space may have several through a legal instrument that runs with the land. Is that
Severed. Yeah, severed.
severed through a legal instrument that runs through the land. We support the county in this important method of clustering development and providing large open space that may eventually have conservation easement protections. So,
Okay, so in the conservation neighborhoods, they, one of the key components, it says here, is that there's at least, in new subdivisions, at least 50% will have to be preserved as open space. In your opinion, did the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission consider conservation neighborhoods to have an important function for protecting the environment?
absolutely.
Okay, on the bottom of page 1, onto page 2, talks about low impact natural resource areas in the conservation area. And versus the conservation area, if you can read, let me see where. The Florida Fish, the FWCC discusses low impact natural resource areas and versus conservation areas. And they warn about waiting until actual development permitting stays, specifically, for wetland permitting to determine conservation areas. In your personal opinion, why is it important for the county to do long-range planning for conservation areas and not wait until development review stage for analysis?
The horse is already out of the barn at that point. I mean, if you wait until a problem comes up, like let's talk about a hurricane preparedness plan. You're not going to write one until the last minute. I mean, this is a plan that was laid out. Everybody knows what to do. Everyone that participated in this had ample opportunity, and it was a good idea for the environment. I can't speak to a lot of other aspects of this, but as far as the environment, which is my little corner of the universe, I really feel like this was a stellar Cadillac plan.
Have you ever read Chapter 16 of the Comprehensive Plan, which deals with the sector plan?
I have.
Have you read the part about preserving natural resources? I would imagine you probably read that part, especially protecting waterways and aquatic life. So in your opinion, why are those provisions of the comp plan and in the sector plan, Chapter 16, important to the county to follow through?
Because these concepts were intended to protect the resource and allow the public to have access, but also protect the community that was living there. I mean, we will never have enough money to fix everything that we've impacted. Not saying that we do it purposely, but we tend to alter the landscape where we live. And this sector plan allowed some of those areas that are very sensitive to be protected in a manner that everybody considered valuable at that time. So,
If we could pull up Exhibit 20, which is this chapter that I'm talking about, and go to page 2.
there you go. The environment
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So establish a green infrastructure network of interconnected recreation areas and open space. So, basically, don't slice it and dice it and everybody put up a privacy fence and, completely alter the landscape, but keep it open. Identify, protect, and when impacted by development, restore these key ecosystems. We know, biologically speaking, primary, secondary production determines the health of these rivers. And in doing so, if you protect these first and second order creeks, which are little tiny sensitive areas, that in turn will help the health of the river system. Identify, protect, and when impacted by development, restore wildlife habitat in corridors. My goodness, we have bear, we have panther, we have raccoons, we have foxes, we have all kinds of wildlife that we share the landscape with, and we have migrants that pass through the area or choose to raise their young. A lot of birds, a lot of different species besides us on the planet. And so, we need to just kind of design our landscape and the way we move forward around these organisms, in my opinion. And lastly, reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So one of the beautiful things about this sector plan was actually making these small little community hotspots, if you will, so that they were not car-centric, but rather bicycle, walkable communities, all the things that we strive for as we develop or retrofit now. But this was looking forward, with a good plan, and it's being just taken apart bit by bit, in my opinion.
So if we go to page 4, this is in the comprehensive plan, objective FLU 16.4, talks about the environment. And it talks about green infrastructure under the policies. Can you talk a little bit about green infrastructure and why conservation neighborhoods are an important land use to keep in the sector plan?
Sure. So green infrastructure means, low impact development where you concentrate water. Maybe a soccer field would be considered, green infrastructure. And again, having open areas without all these, divisions with roads and fences and whatnot allows a lot of wildlife to also use that area at night when we may not use it during the day. And it allows the public, the community, to have access to these areas when the weather's nice, but when we have a hurricane or tropical downpour or whatever, there are areas that can actually have double duty where they're holding this stormwater and able to allow recharge into our aquifer, which again is connected to our waterways, which again is my bailiwick. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we could pull up for Ms. Albrecht, petitioner Exhibit 5. I'm going to show you some pictures of this area. Are you familiar with this area?
I am.
Ms. Rogers, let me kind of interrupt. So I just to make sure I'm piecing this together
Sure.
appropriate, you're saying that future land use, section 16.1.2 and 16.4, as we've discussed here in the last couple minutes, that the current ordinance is not consistent with these provisions of the Escambia County Code, or the future land use element?
with this chapter is for the sector plan. I'm trying to show what the value was, that what we're losing and what the county is not doing, they're not analyzing the impacts. If you take a property out of the sector plan and you increase the density to an urban density in the area that we'll talk about coming up, what is the effect, or what are the impacts? And so I'm trying to show the value, I'm trying to show that the state cared, and the Florida Fish and Wildlife cared before they weren't allowed to comment. I guess that's where I was going.
Okay.
So this is Google Map picture. If you can look up on the right side, you can see the subject property. You can't see all the way out to the highway, but I have some other pictures. Let me open mine up so I'm looking at the same thing.
If you were to orient that north, you would be looking at an angle towards the upper right-hand corner, so.
Yeah, if we just go to the next page. I took a series of them. So there's Highway 29,
Mhm.
and there's the subject property. So you recognize that. And then the dirt road coming off Highway 29 is Cedar Tree. And I have other witnesses that'll testify to the specifics on this. Okay, if we can go to the next one. Here's a little closer from another angle.
Mhm.
Do you see the neighborhood that's in south of the subject property?
Mhm.
Do you see the bend in the road? That road is Ridgeway.
Mhm.
There's a channel in between, and we'll have more testimony about that later, but what do you see in these pictures? You see the channel for that neighborhood that I pointed out, and that irregular blob in the back. That, I'll get to that. I don't wanna, because of testimony, I don't wanna give testimony, so I'll wait on that, although I do live there. Okay, Ms. Albrecht, okay, I'm gonna go to another one. I'm gonna say these. Well, let me see, is there anything else that,
Well, why don't I talk about that for a
yeah,
second?
let me,
So what you're looking at here is you have Highway 29 in the upper right-hand corner, and you're now looking at the parcel that's developed in the forefront, and it's pretty rural. I mean, it's going towards suburban, but those are large areas, large tracts of land. Where the road makes a little wiggle, that's probably a seepage slope. It's probably one of the smaller waterways, and you can see it's kind of going into a heavily forested area. If you're looking really closely, you can see a couple of different colors of trees, and so you can see that there's different species. So there's low-lying areas and there's upland areas there, and so basically when we have a rain event, anybody that lives south of that dip, water is going to flow towards that dip. It's going to go under that road, probably with a culvert, because they're a lot more inexpensive to place. But if you, and then where that dark line that's almost perfectly straight, that's probably the culvert, leads into a forested area. And so Mother Nature, she's pretty good at designing things. What she does is she puts a lot of trees in the riparian areas and then the wetland areas, so that when we have these big rain events, that the roots and the trees and the leaves and the wood and everything that gets dropped out of the trees slows that water down. Slow it down so you don't have erosion. And then it's just basically weeping into that area. So it's a nicely forested area, and it actually, Jack's Branch, this is part of Jack's Branch watershed, goes on the other side of Highway 29, so it's clipped again there, and it goes up pretty far. I think I looked it up, it's 24 square miles drain into this tributary that then enters the Perdido River. So it's,
if we could go to image, or page 6, I think I have some other images that will show some of that.
yeah. So there you can really, this particular image, you can really see on the upper part of the picture where there's like a silvery gray image to the trees. That is, that is definitely a wetter area than what you see where there's like dirt roads, not the red clay road, but the rectangular two-tone and the small, probably dirt pit that somebody was probably looking for clay or something of that ilk.
Okay, if we can go to the next picture too. These are gonna be a series, you're doing great with the exhibits. If you go to the next one, down, after that. What, in this picture, can you still identify the
Oh.
Highway 29, you have the,
So,
go
yeah,
ahead.
this really kind of depicts the area. So you can see the area that's not developed crosses over 29, reaches up. You've got the main stem of the channel that is where the bend of Highway 29 is, kind of opposite that. And then you have that flowing to the left. You have a little bit of agriculture in the upper left-hand corner, but most of it is a wooded, open area. And there's a lot of wetlands in that particular slide. Now on the right side and the lower part, on the right side of Highway 29 to the east, and then lower where it's developed, it's starting to get pretty dense, but you have a very rural area in that picture.
in that map there, can you see Jack's Branch there?
Mm-hmm.
So,
All of that watershed is Jack's Branch. Everything is flowing together, ultimately coming together, convergence before it enters the Perdido River.
okay, if we go to the next one, and there's the Perdido River on the left, all the way on the left, is that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think that's all I need from, on the, okay. If we could go to Petitioner Exhibit 15, page 3. This is the backup for the amendment. So here's just a map of it. The property is outlined in gray.
Mm-hmm. So that's a road map, right?
Yeah, that's just a
not a
road map,
waterway
yeah.
map, just for everybody's clarification.
Okay. Going to go down. Okay, if we go to page 5, please. This is a flood zone map, but it's from 2006. Can you tell me your opinion on this map?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of new flood zone maps made after Hurricane Ivan, Dennis, Katrina, Harvey. So I would say, this could have been an updated map. And actually, Escambia County has an excellent GIS department, so they probably could have pulled one together.
Okay, the next page, prime soil on the property.
So that's a real interesting map because the green areas are actually the areas where it would be good to consider building. Note the road that has a little dip in it on Ridgeway there. You see how that's white? That recognizes on this map that, that's an area where it would not be considered prime to plant. Keeping in mind, this is timberland, right? This is not, trees have a really important role in our environment. And so this is telling you where the prime soils are if you were a cotton farmer or such. So, next.
Okay, if we could go to page 65.
So this is a topographic map. This gives all kinds of information. You can see the main stem of the creek.
So just
Jack's
what page was, this was page 7?
We're on page 65
No,
of,
65 of 118, okay.
okay.
Okay, so, here, this shows elevations topographically, and it shows the main stem of the creek system as it crosses under Highway 29. It also shows several of the tributaries that enter it, including where that funny little dip in the road is. So that basically shows you that, the dark line, I believe is 150-foot elevation, and you're going down in 10-foot, it might be 100 foot elevations, but you're basically going down in 10-foot intervals. And so you can see how much of that area is drains towards the main stem of the creek, which is what goes under Highway 29, and then it would continue west. But in the upper left-hand corner, where you have this topographic feature that's in the end of Hillock section of this 99 acres, a lot of that area in the upper is recognized as wetland, and yeah, it's low lying, like don't build there.
That's what the symbol is with the spikes on it, that is identified.
Those are wetlands, yeah. And there's wetlands on the bottom below Knoll Drive.
So can you explain how the wetlands would be working in this area?
How they would be working is they're there because that's where water pools, that's where water gathers. When we have these big rain events, basically water is going to be moving through that area. Again, every time it meets with another branch, another creek, it's going to grow in size. When you have a blue line with a couple of 3 little dots like you do going through the property that we're talking about in Molino Quadrangle, there's a broken blue line, and there's also one in the upper right-hand corner a little to the west of Pin Oak. Those are ephemeral creeks, so they might not be, like we've in our area, we've recently had a drought now. We're in a cloud this morning, but like probably 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we hadn't had rain in almost 8 weeks, so we were bone dry. Those little creeks would have been bone dry. And now with the moisture picking up again, they might be flowing because our groundwater table was low.
Okay, if we could move to petitioner exhibit 9. I believe this was a contested one also. Can you tell us, Ms. Albrecht, what this is?
That's a swim plan. So again, these plans are really important, especially if you can abide by them, because they kind of put a lot of effort and energy into collecting information and then putting them together and recognizing as a snapshot the conditions of the resource. So in this particular case, Northwest Florida Water Management District put together a Perdido Swim Plan, Surface Water Improvement Management Plan. There's one for the Escambia system, there's one for Choctawhatchee, there's one for a number of different bays. And within this document, they're looking at the health of the overall system. I participated with this particular, I've participated with many over the years, and they're updated about every 10 years. So this one would have come out, I think, in 2017. We had, it takes about 3 years to collect all the data, analyze it, and see where the data gaps are.
And
Excuse me, Your Honor. I just want to note this is also one of the exhibits that we objected to, and for the same reasons. And I assume you will.
Let me ask Ms. Rogers, what's the, I mean, I recognize that this,
the connection, yeah.
that this deals with the Perdido River and presumably the surrounding environment, but how does this specifically bear on the sector plan that's currently before me?
So there are two detailed specific area plans in the sector plan, Muskogee and the Jacks Branch. This area is in the Jacks Branch Detailed Specific Area Plan, or DSAP. And we saw from the aerial photos that Jacks Branch was part of that drainage basin. We are in the Jacks Branch drainage basin. And so this report describes, there's a map on there that I would like to show, showing how Jacks Branch is going into the Perdido, and it kind of shows the whole area where this subject area is and the importance of it. It also has information about Perdido River being an outstanding Florida water, and so why it's important to.
But I don't think any of those are in dispute. Would they? I mean, I don't think there's a dispute that the Perdido River's an OFW and that Jacks Branch flows in.
Okay.
I mean, I tend to be fairly liberal in terms of relevance, and you may be able to tie it in. I'll receive petitioner's Exhibit 9, although, and I'll allow Ms. Albrecht to testify, but you'll need to be creative in convincing me how this will apply in my recommended order.
Okay,
But I'll receive it in evidence. So over objection,
thank you.
petitioner's Exhibit 9 is received in evidence.
Okay, on page 4, let's see, page 4, I see that you were on the technical and public review, and the other group that you are affiliated with on page 9, the Brim Fishermen Association, is also mentioned. And you did talk about that, so we'll skip down to page 13.
So, if, just FYI, you're looking at Escambia County, which is in light green, and then on the Santa Rosa side, there's a dark green line, and so half the county drains into the Escambia River, and then Highway 29 pretty much follows the old ridge line, which would have been like the stagecoach route back before we had cars and, you know, crisscross the landscape. And so you can see Jacks Branch is one of the first large tributaries to enter the system. I mean, there's small drainages, but this is, you know, clearly a small map just kind of outlining where all the main tributaries are. So you can see there's Cow Devil, and there's a couple other, McDavid and Brushy Creek. So the Brim Fishermen, the nonprofit I mentioned that I inherited, we have, I think, 4 sampling stations on Brushy Creek, and we have several on the Perdido River, and we have several down in the lower river, and then we have several in the bay. So we sample that pretty frequently.
Okay, if we could move to petitioner Exhibit 14. If we can go to page 14. I think we already did that one on 14. Let's see. Let's go to page 21, please. Okay, this is the actual DSAP document for the sector plan, and it's again talking about the sector plan, the conservation neighborhood, I'm sorry. And it talks about clustering. In your opinion, is clustering an important concept, clustering of homes, I'm sorry, is it an important concept for protecting natural resources?
Sure, if it's applied the way it was intended, because the clustering of homes was not to take away from the large landowners' ability of what to do. It was just, hey, cluster in the high areas and avoid the low-lying areas. So, yes. Again, this was a Cadillac plan. I mean, it's discouraging to think how much time and energy it took, not only of the people writing it and the county efforts and energies, but the community that participated in this, and here we are dismantling it while growth is, basically bowling over the area, and it's very disappointing that we can't follow the plan as designed.
So, Ms. Albrecht, are you familiar with the term ecosystem services?
Sure. So ecosystem services are a pretty broad range of services that the environment provide to us that we kind of take for granted. So for instance, trees take up different amounts of rain and water from groundwater, and then they provide shade. They're also taking up nutrients. One of the things that we seem to be doing a lot in the last couple of years in Northwest Florida is cutting down a lot of trees in large, 20, 30, 200 acre plots. And what that's doing is really altering how water moves in our environment, because trees act as vertical stormwater ponds, and they can hold 300 to 400 gallons of water. I mean, a poplar or a willow on a hot July day can take up 300 to 400 gallons of water, and through its leaves and transpiration, make it cooler underneath it. So incredibly important systems, which a lot of people are unaware that they have this service that they provide. Much like marshes will take up, incredible amounts of nutrients and trap soils and sediments, and so ecosystem services is sort of a blanket buzzword that's used a lot, and a lot of our environmental components that make our community amazing and unique are kind of housed within that.
So in conservation neighborhood, which the subject parcels are, what type of ecosystem services would you expect to find in that type of a land use category?
So I think we've already, made the point of talking about how open areas can be used to trap stormwater, hold water, slowly release water. Trees have a role in this as far as taking up water. They provide habitat. You have a lot of native species that depend on a lot of native trees. And these species, they migrate through the area. They raise their young here. They, basically come here to winter. A number of different things. And then on the ground, you also have a lot of species, gopher tortoises, which were, at the time of this document, listed, and now they're slowly being delisted. So, a lot of things are changing as we seem to be lowering the bar instead of raising the bar to protect these areas. And to me, that's the real crime, because, several generations out, what are they going to have left to look at and say, oh, this is nature, if we keep slicing and dicing it? So.
Okay, thank you. If we could go to petitioner exhibit 15.
Your Honor,
Yes, ma'am.
could I have a bathroom break?
Yeah, sure. We've been at it, oh gosh, yeah, we've been at it, I forgot, that's not the right time, but we've been at it an hour and a half. Why don't we take 10 minutes? Is that, all right, we'll take 10
Thank
minutes, everybody can get something to drink. We'll have it as 10:33. We'll come back at 10:45.
Thank you.
I don't think I have a lot more, so. No, you're fine.
All right, we ready to get back on the record?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, Ms. Rogers?
Your Honor, before we
Yes, sir.
continue, I've been having trouble hearing, and I've been receiving some complaints from other people outside in the broadcast that they're just not picking up the testimony that's being given on the microphone. So I just wanted to make everybody aware of that. I know that the court reporter's having some difficulty even. So if the witness could maybe,
I'll try to project. I
Yeah.
have a soft voice.
You are somewhat soft-spoken. I haven't had a problem, but I understand that someone listening remotely, and hopefully, Ms. Odom, you've been able to get everything, okay. All
Your
right.
Honor, as far as time management, I assume we're going to roughly get equal opportunity, but we do have only a day scheduled and we're midway through almost.
I was curious, frankly, when I got the pre-hearing stip and saw the number of witnesses, I was curious as to whether we were gonna be able to pull this in a day. If we can't, we'll reschedule another day and I'll drive back over and we can finish, or we can discuss maybe doing it by Zoom if, I know these are growth management cases are typically done in the locale in which the ordinance has been adopted, but, there are ways I think we'll be able to manage the conclusion
Yes, sir.
of the proceeding. But, yeah, I thought it was a bit of I mean, you guys asked for a day and I gave you a day, but when I saw how many witnesses there were gonna be, I had some questions, but,
This is this is my longest, and we're almost done.
okay.
So just,
Yep, we'll go as long as we need to, so. Go ahead.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, brevity is not my strength, so.
And as long as you guys don't kick us out at 5 o'clock, I'm willing to go late. So, all right, Ms. Rogers?
believe, if we could, are we on, exhibit 15, petitioner exhibit 15? If we could go to page 87, where the staff analysis starts. So in reading through the development services staff analysis, or I believe you read through Mr. Metcalf's brief coverage of natural resources and stormwater in his report. In your opinion, did you see an adequate type of analysis that would deal with the full impacts to the environment or the natural resources that this amendment would allow, considering the maximum densities, the intensities, and the uses that mixed-use suburban would allow?
I didn't see that. I saw that everything is being hinged on what was done in 2007, 8, 9, 10, when it came out in 11, but I'm not seeing current analysis, and the landscape has changed. I mean, Navy Federal Credit Union coming to this area, 10,000 jobs, has completely changed the landscape up there, so no.
So when you say that you saw things from 2007, 2008, are you talking about the DSAP language in there?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
from the meetings and participating.
So as a biologist with an emphasis in water quality expertise, what type of analysis would you consider using when you were, would you do or would you consider when you were analyzing a land use change such as this? What would you be looking at?
So I would go back to that topographic map where you're looking at the lay of the land. You're looking at what kind of fragmentation has occurred with, roads and bridges and culverts and the things I've been speaking about this morning. Also, the types of vegetation that you have there. I mean, you have a rural area, and it's not going from rural to suburban. It's going from rural to almost urban by having this change with this many dwelling units onto this topographic area that really has some sensitive lands in it. So the sector plan, what was beautiful about it was it identified the landscape, the natural areas, and it concentrated development away from these sensitive areas. And it looked at how roads and bridges and whatnot would be developed and looked at basically spanning them as opposed to, constricting them, which is what we tend to do when we develop bridges.
Do you ever work with local governments, including doing like advocacy or water quality water quality and environmental issues?
Yes, yes. In fact, we just published a couple of reports for the city of Pensacola where we did a 15-month-long study, Bruce Beach, and there's a newly proposed paddling trail that would go from the mouth of Bayou Chico along the waterfront into Bayou Tahar towards Carpenter Creek. So in that particular scenario, we did water quality. We were looking at human health issues, so bacteria. So 2 reports there, and then I've worked with a number of different groups. So the Brim Fishermen Association, during Restore from the oil spill, we submitted a watershed-wide holistic approach to addressing one of our urban creeks, Carpenter Creek, that feeds into Bayou Tahar. And also the Brim Fishermen, we work with the government, with the DEP, the state agency. So we're collecting the samples and then they're analyzing them in their facility. But for some of the other projects that I'm working on, the newly established estuary program, right now I'm finishing up a report where I'm looking at the upper watershed. So it's not a governmental agency, but they sure get their money from the government. So it's connected.
And you do water sampling in the area of where the subject properties are?
Yeah.
Are you aware of instances of flooding in Escambia County and low-lying development being done in low-lying areas?
Yes, because we engineers, unless they've gone to a university or had experience working with biologists, often don't see watersheds as living entities that are constantly moving and evolving and adapting to climatic conditions. So, yes. Can you repeat your question?
Just if you are aware of flooding in
Yes.
Escambia County in
So-
low-lying areas?
In low-lying areas. So in the case of Escambia County and the Perdido watershed, there were some subdevelopments that were built in the 80s when we didn't know any better, although the biologists that were at the time state biologists warned about putting subdevelopments in an area where you have confluences occurring. So in this particular case, I'm talking about 11 Mile Creek, which is fed by 10 Mile Creek, and later 8 Mile Creek, all part of the 11 Mile Creek watershed. 2 subdivisions, one called Bristol Park and the other one called Ashbury Hills. They were built right up next to these creeks, and during these tropical weather events, there's flooding. So there had been flooding in the past that had caused some problems, but then in 2014, this area had an unprecedented amount of rainfall. We had 28 inches of rain in 24 hours, and basically a number of homes in this particular area next to these creeks flooded 4 to 5 feet of water flowing through their homes. So right now, Escambia County, this county that we're sitting in, is trying to purchase properties so they can put stormwater ponds in these sensitive areas. Had they had a sector plan and abided by it, that probably wouldn't have happened, but they didn't. So now we're all kind of paying that price.
You talked to me about Babcock Ranch, and that is one of the exhibits on Exhibit 8 that was objected to. But why did you think that was relevant for this hearing today?
So we just had a big hurricane in Florida, Hurricane Ian, and Hurricane Ian came along the Gulf Coast and really impacted South Florida. Well, the sector plan was applied to...
Your Honor, I'd like to object that we've, again, the same issues, but this is not relevant to the issue before you today. Whatever's going on in South Florida is very unfortunate, but I'd like to try to narrow it down and keep it on track.
Ms. Rogers?
I was just having her explain relevance before you made a decision.
Well, if you can kind of tell me how it might be
Okay.
relevant.
I think
without-
it was, that this was and I don't have a strong feeling about it, because I think she may have covered it in testimony already, that having a sector plan that was built with environmental design, was able to withstand the hurricane. Is that basically?
It is.
I'm going to sustain the objection with regard to 8. I'm familiar enough from news accounts as to Babcock Ranch, and I think there's a lot, there are a lot of issues with regard to the development of that parcel that will have to be unpacked, and it's
That's fine.
not just location, but other issues. So I just don't see how that ties into the sector plan in this
Yes.
case, so I'll sustain the objection to 8.
Right, and I'm actually finishing up here. Let me just see if there's anything that we haven't covered. Covered that one already. Okay, if we could just go back to the maps in the beginning on this, Exhibit 15, the backup for the plan. Page here, is that 10? Can we go to page 10? Or actually, just go, page 11, please. Okay. If these two properties are able to opt out of the sector plan, in your opinion, would there be fragmentation of the drainage area? And if they were able to opt out, obviously they don't go away, but they would have increased development rights with mixed-use suburban at 25 dwellings per acre and commercial uses that aren't allowed in conservation neighborhood. They also would lose the 50% preservation for a new subdivision. So what would you say about that in terms of fragmentation of waterway or animal habitat? Do you think that's an issue?
Yeah, it's death by 1,000 paper cuts. I mean, there's a tributary that starts pretty much where the 22 is of the date where it says aerial map, and it runs all the way down till it meets the creek system. And so already that little community has a good buffer, but if you cut down all the trees and start building there, and not leave that area intact, it becomes a conveyance for stormwater and chemicals to enter the system.
And recognizing that there would still be development there with conservation neighborhood, it would just be at a lower density.
Right.
From your experience, why do you think it is appropriate or needful, not just appropriate, but needful for Escambia County to do the type of analysis that we've talked about today at the comprehensive plan level, at the future land use change level, instead of waiting to till the property owner or the developer pulls a permit?
So we rarely raise the bar. We tend to lower the bar, so we try to cut, slice, and dice. So if we wait 5-10 years when there's more pressure on this property, I'm sure there will be stronger voices that will attempt to alter this. But if we left it intact and built as the sector plan decided, you could still have the density. You would just cluster it away from these low-lying areas. So the sector plan looked at things at a holistic level, and what we're doing now is we're kind of looking at them under this very small section, and to me that's just creating chinks in the armor of this Cadillac plan, in my opinion.
I have no further questions. Thank you, Ms. Hallberg.
All right,
Thank you.
Mr. West?
I will turn to, well, how do I do this?
That's fine. You
I
can
think we'll be
continue
able
to
to-
look at
I think you're
the
close
judge.
enough to this.
I don't need to see, if you, as long as it's okay for you, I don't have any problem if you want to direct your answers to the judge.
I will look at you while you ask the question, and then I will look at you and the judge, if that's okay. Okay.
I just want to clarify a few things, and part of this is my hearing is not the greatest, and you have a very high wispy voice, but did I hear you say that there were panthers in the environment that it would be affected?
You know what? We do have panthers in this area. They're very secretive, and you probably have never seen them, but the old timers, the brim fishermen, have paw prints that they got from the sandbars on the Perdido River.
Okay. I'm going on a hike with some Boy Scouts next weekend, and I just wanted to make sure that I heard that correct. So I know we have to worry about panthers, okay?
No. You'll make so much noise, the panthers will be long gone.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you say that the sector plan runs north to the state line?
No, I was saying that the Perdido watershed,
Perdido watershed, okay.
yeah,
Okay.
the Perdido watershed doesn't recognize state lines or county lines.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually starts in Alabama, and 2/3 of the Perdido watershed is in Alabama.
Okay. Do you have any knowledge of any particular project that's contemplated for this particular property?
I do not.
Okay, so when you say things like cut down all the trees, that's sort of hyperbole?
So I work in this community, and I work within several watersheds, and in Santa Rosa County, and in northern Escambia County, and in this area of the incorporated city, we're watching a lot of natural lands be cut down. It seems to be the MO that we're doing as far as development.
But at this point, since you don't know of any project, you don't know what will be cut down, if anything.
No.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
Anything further limited to the
To redirect,
cross-examination
yeah.
on redirect?
When you have conservation neighborhood at 3 houses per acre, with half of that property, put in conservation for open space and the rest of it clustering the housing, versus mixed-use suburban 25 dwelling units per acre, do you think that there would be more loss of trees in those scenarios? Obviously, we don't know what's going to be done because this is not a permit hearing, but
I would presume there would be some trees lost, and unless, the development that's going in there is going to be a top-notch quality where people value trees, I would say there will probably be a lot of clear cutting.
thank you.
Anything further?
That's all, thank you.
All right, Ms. Albrecht, thank you for your
Thank you very
participation.
much.
Not sure if you'll be sticking around, but you're obviously welcome to do so.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Okay, Your Honor, I'd like
Ms.
to
Rogers?
call my next witness, Betty Tuttle, please.
Tuttle, if I could have you raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your full name, please.
Betty L. Tuttle.
Okay, thank you. Please be seated. Give me 1 second. All right, and Ms. Tuttle is being offered as a fact witness as opposed to an expert witness?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Ms. Rogers?
Could you please state your name for the record?
Betty Tuttle.
And where do you live in relation to these parcels?
I live south. My backyard is right up against where one of the
Ms. Tuttle, if I
properties
could
would
have you move into the microphone and speak up a little bit, please.
be. I live south of the property, right behind it.
Okay. if we could go to, what is this, petitioner exhibit 15. Again, the backup on page 11. So do you see your house on that map?
I do. I don't see the house, but I
Or
see
you
the
see the
lot.
property, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And could you describe which lot is yours?
It's right at the bend, right at the little curve there,
The curve
right where
On which street?
on Ridgeway.
Okay.
Are you kind of the pie shape?
I am the pie shaped,
Okay.
How long have you lived in the neighborhood?
over 30 years.
And could you describe the neighborhood for me, please?
Our neighborhood is, large lots, a lot of trees.
Okay. Anything else?
No, just large lots, a lot of trees, a little bit of rolling hill, and a lot of wet areas even in our neighborhood.
Okay, if we could look at petitioner exhibit 4. Just to clarify, is that you in the red parcel there?
Yes,
And above you to the north are the subject properties of this plan amendment?
yes.
If we can go to exhibit 5, page 4. Okay, and that's your, so we've established that that's your lot there with the rounded edge. What is on the right side of your property line there?
It's the county ditch. I guess they're calling it the channel,
Okay,
Ridgeway Channel.
where does that channel drain to?
Drains, into the woods behind the property in the back where all those trees are back there. And around my lot and back into the properties we're talking about today.
So where does the water come from before it gets to the channel?
Well, when they built the road on Ridgeway, they have cement ditches on several of the homes where they're taking the storm water away from the road, and it goes downhill into that channel. Both sides of the road go downhill, so basically it's the drainage for the entire street.
How would you, Ms. Tuttle, how would you describe the subject property behind you?
Wet. Close to me, it's wet. My property in the back, half acre, 3/4 acre is wet as well.
Is it open or is it?
No, it's trees. It's pine trees mostly, pine timberland.
After a rain, is it very wet?
Yes, yes,
Do you have any flooding issues, Ms. Tuttle?
I do.
How long have you had flooding issues and where do you have it?
We've always had some flooding, probably the last, and my property goes downhill from the street all the way down into the pie shape, downhill. And the back acre, if you go back there at certain times of the year, you can see water just coming up out of the ground. It's just there. I don't know if it's old creek beds or what, but yeah, it's definitely wet. And then over the years, sand, debris, stuff washes down those ditches, and that channel area has filled in. 30 years they haven't dug it out, they haven't maintained it, and it used to go around the back side of the property, and a lot of that is filled in. So it's much worse now, particularly after Ivan.
If we could go to petitioner exhibit number 6, please, on page 25. This is the well, go to the first page first to identify this as the Escambia County Jacks Branch Basin Study from February 2011. So this has been around for a while, and it's on page 25. We're gonna look. There's different sections. If you go to page, you guys are faster than I am. Okay. If you look on page 25, the green dots there are designated culverts.
Right, there's,
Can you see on
I,
Ridgeway?
I have seen this, and I can see some green, but yeah, there is a few culverts down Ridgeway.
Okay, so there's a culvert that runs underneath the road into that channel?
The culvert, they run downhill, the ditches, and then they go in underground into culverts, and then they go down that channel that's on the east side of my property,
Okay,
and drain out there.
I'm sorry. If we go to page 34,
Okay.
there in a second, sorry. Okay, the third, I don't know if you can see that from here, but the third entry down, actually the fourth entry down,
Right,
says Ridgeway Channel.
right.
Can you read that?
It says, existing asphalt line channel downstream of culvert is in extreme disrepair. Replace lining with mooring material.
Okay, have they replaced the lining with armoring material, or is it still in disrepair?
No, it's in terrible disrepair.
Okay.
It's busted up in there, and it's full of dirt and sand and filled in, a lot of it.
And did you say you reported it to the county?
I've called the county a couple of years. I copied emails to my county commissioner. And I did get an engineer that did come down there a few years ago, but it was never completed. And, it's not doing its job.
Back to these, the subject properties, did you testify at the May 3rd, 2022 Planning Board hearing?
I did.
Were you supporting or opposing the future land use change?
I was opposing it.
And, we said before, conservation neighborhood allows 3 homes per acre, preserving half of the property for a new subdivision as open space. And mixed-use suburban would allow 25 dwelling units per acre with commercial uses up to heavy commercial. What were your concerns with this proposed change from conservation neighborhood to mixed-use suburban?
Well, the storage, the stormwater, it's, where's it gonna go? It's a problem now, even in, rural area where I live. What's it gonna be like with a, heavier density home building back there? Where's all that water gonna drain to?
Is that what you told the staff and the planning board in May?
I told them mostly about my issues with my ditch and that the water did drain back there, but that, there is no really stormwater plan, not in my neighborhood. It's simply, they picked the lowest point of the road, where the road is, and they dug a channel out, and it goes just into people's backyards, people's property. So it's not a solution. It's really, I feel like I'm doing the county a favor by letting them go drain the neighborhood ditch into my yard. So it's, it doesn't seem right to me.
There's just one final question for you. During the planning board hearing, the agent for the applicant was very negative about the sector plan conservation neighborhoods. And you told the board that you did want to live in the conservation neighborhood. Do you still feel that way?
Well, yeah, what's the alternative? It's if you have high density, there's less place for this storm water to go. Even if you take the ditch out and you take all this, just the water that lands on my property on its own, just where the water fell out of the sky, only landed in my property. I didn't get everybody else's storm water flowing down toward my property. My property is very wet. And my back acre, like I said, in heavy rain, there's water seeping out of the ground there. So I don't know how in the world you're gonna build on that. You're gonna have a lot of angry parents and people just like me that are gonna be complaining about, drainage.
I have no further questions. Thank you very much for coming.
Mr. West?
No question, sir.
All right, Ms. Tuttle? Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Your Honor, my next witness is Bill Dodson.
Mr. Dodson? Dodson, can Can I have you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And your full name, please.
William Lamar Dodson.
All right, please be seated, sir.
And-
Ms. Rogers?
Okay, and I'm offering Mr. Dodson as a fact witness also.
Okay.
Could you please state your name for the record?
William Lamar Dodson.
And where do you live in relation to these two subject properties?
I live at 1490 Ridgeway, which is on the far western end of the property. I'm south of it.
Okay, we'll pull up some maps here in a minute. How long have you lived in that neighborhood?
40 and a half years.
Could you describe the neighborhood for me?
It's got a lot of hills. There's not a lot of flat space in it. All of it runs to a central location down like Ms. Tuttle said, down to her house. There is a ditch behind the properties that go within 5 feet of the property line that border all the way down to that ditch. And that's what saves their land from washing away there.
So when you say there's a ditch along the back, along the whole length of the parcel?
Yes, sir. In fact, it starts to the property, to the west of it, Cicelo's property, and it comes around behind my house, goes down to behind the Rogers house, behind the Cerny's house, whoever lives in the other house now, and Tuttle's house, and that's where that
And
drainage.
they all connect into that, the ditch she described that run along the side of her property then connects into that cross
Yes,
ditch.
that's
Okay.
just half of it, because over the eastern half of that ditch, there's another hill that runs down there.
Okay.
Okay, if we could look at petitioner exhibit 15, that might help with identifying on page 11. So where are you on this map, Mr. Dodson?
And if you go to the left lower corner, and you come down, you see a bright spot there, that is my driveway, my house.
All the way at the end of Ridgeway?
No, not all the way at the end of Ridgeway, at the end of the pavement on Ridgeway.
Okay,
There's about a 200-foot length from my house back to the property back there that is grown up. And
okay.
when the county paved Hillock, I brought that to the engineer's attention, and he said, well, there's trees there, he's not gonna fool them, so they didn't pave it.
Let me see if I can find a better. All right, I'm gonna show you some different pictures on page 14 of this same exhibit. You recognize that street?
Yes, that's going up the hill to, on Cedar Tree to that property.
Okay, if we scroll down to 17. Right there.
That's the culvert they put in. And I'm thinking somewhere around 87 in there, Highway 29 flooded at that little underpass or culverts they have up there. Just south of the church. But they had to come in and put those culverts in after that because it washed out so much.
So Cedar Tree is just a dirt road?
Cedar Tree is a dirt road.
Okay, if we look at page 18, that's Cedar Tree then?
If that is the western side of Cedar Tree.
Okay. Does that go all the way back the length of the subject properties?
No, it stops up there at the top of that hill where that house is now. There is a trail, and I say a trail from there through the property back to back, my house. But the only thing I've ever seen on it is four-wheelers, go-karts, and dirt bikes.
Okay, let's look at page 19. Can you tell us what we're seeing here?
That is actually where the pavement stops on Hillock. That trail on the left-hand side there was put there. The guy lived in the house on Cicelo's property, and he didn't like it because he had to go down Hillock and make a turn to go into his driveway, and he couldn't see who was coming to visit with him, so he cut his trail.
Okay, so that gravel road is not actually Hillock.
No,
It's a right-of-way, okay. Let's look at number 20. That's 21. In the inset there, is where that arrow is that Hillock Road?
That's Hillock Road, and right there where it makes a little turn to the right is my driveway. As you can see, the dark spots down through that, that is actually supposed to be Hillock Road there.
So Hillock Road stops,
The pavement stops there at my driveway.
okay, and the rest of it is unopened,
The rest of it's grown up,
grown up like trees and stuff?
trees.
Okay. Okay, could you describe on the subject properties behind you, the ones we're talking about today, you're familiar with which ones we're talking about today, two properties? What has typically occurred on those properties?
Well, that's I'm gonna speak about the western 40 acres. When I first moved out there in '82, it was leased to a hunting club. So they kept the land cleared off a little bit where you could walk through it and see what was happening. Like I say, there was some trails, but nothing you could drive on. There's hills, it's not flat land, it's hills right there. And it'll drop off into the swamp.
Was there any other activity there? The county had listed it as timberland?
This timberland has been cut twice. The last time they more or less clear cut that 40 acres behind me. You don't see, they left some borderline trees. They wouldn't get too close to the existing property lines because they didn't want to damage, but most of the trees have been cut off behind me
Okay, so it's been harvested twice, you said? That you were- okay.
twice.
If we could go to petitioner exhibit 5. You can see your residence there, that's your residence. Let's see.
No, my residence is
We're on,
a little further to the left.
on page 1, I'm sorry. I'm looking at a different one. Okay, that's your residence on the end of the neighborhood, the last
At
house.
the end down there, yes, the top of the left hand.
What is that rectangular section behind the neighborhood?
I haven't walked up, but I think that is probably a deer plot. There used to be one just the other side of where the cedar tree came off of the hill there. And it's barely showing, but I think that's somebody's hunting space there is where I think that is. The little one up there is where that ditch drains in down there and then it's washed all that white sand down there. A lot of times you can't cross it in that area.
Okay, if we could go to page 2. So this parcel goes out to Highway 29 on the short side.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to page 3. Is that how far, I mean, I can see it on the map. You've probably walked down, or driven down there, or walked down there, I'm not sure. Is that where Cedar Tree stops right there with that last house there? Is that what you were saying?
Cedar tree stops up there at the top of there, where that big white or clear space is.
Where the clear
And
space
the
is?
little trail comes down to the,
And
and
then
someone has cut one over to the rectangular, and that other little sandy spot there is more or less where all the sand is washed down to the wetlands there.
okay. So Cedar Tree is just only partially cleared out.
Right.
All right, I think we took care of some of these. Okay, on the Hillock parcel, one of these parcels is addressed on Highway 29, one of them has a Hillock address. Can the Hillock property currently be accessed from the front parcel? If, I'm sorry, let me say this again. There's two parcels, you were referencing the 40 plus and then the other one. Can the Hillock property, in your opinion, be accessed from the front parcel that borders on Highway 29?
Well, I've never seen anything on that road go-karts, dirt bikes, and four-wheelers. And that one clear spot up there, they may be able to get by there if it's not wet, but if it's wet, no, they won't be able to bypass it.
Okay, so most likely the Hillock Road, property would have to access it from Hillock Road?
From Hillock. That would be the wise choice.
Okay, and Hillock runs north-south there?
Yes.
Let's see if we can get to a more, page 3. Is that page 3? Okay, what are the other roads that get you to Hillock, since that runs north-south? What are the ones that get you off Highway 29?
If you come down Neal Road from 29, Neal Road runs right in the middle of the subdivision. But you could cut off to the first left road and take Knollwood, and it will dead end on the south end of Hillock. Or you can take the first road to the left or to the right, which is Ridgeway, and it will come out on the north end of Hillock.
Okay, so Neal Road, Ridgeway, and Knollwood,
Knollwood.
and those are all internal roads to the neighborhood, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, if we could go to page 65 of petitioner exhibit 15. You saw this, we used this with Ms. Albrecht, but do you see the blue line in there?
Yes.
Have you ever seen that stream or that wet area there?
Yes.
Okay, and do you agree that that's probably where the drainage from Ms. Tuttle's property goes into?
Yes, also that line that comes under 29 there, I believe it was 1987, that flooded. And the county had to come in and clean out their culverts in there for the water to drain them out. So it does get wet in there.
So how would you describe the subject properties behind you?
Well, it starts out high and pretty well dry, but it doesn't, for the 40 acres, you would be lucky to probably get 15 out of it to build on and call flat and level ground. Anything else you're gonna have to level out.
So are you saying it's sloped or?
I'm saying, yes, it don't go far back from that property line that you start going downhill, either to the north or to the east.
Is there any wildlife back there that you've observed in your 40 years of living there?
I've seen deer, raccoons, possums, gopher turtles. One time I caught a wild pig on my property. I've seen a bear back there. That was many years ago. I think a lot of times it depend on whether or not we're in a dry spell and the wildlife will converse between the Perdido Bay and the Escambia River Bay.
So the wildlife goes between the two?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Dodson, do you have any concerns about the county allowing increased density and the increased intensity that we talked about with mixed-use suburban, 25 homes per acre, up to heavy commercial uses back there?
Well, I'm against heavy commercial usage on that property, or any property that's going to affect it the way it is. I don't know if you get 25 houses per acre on that land or not, without doing a whole lot of modification to it.
I'll ask you the question that I asked Ms. Tuttle before. The agent for the applicant was saying that none of the property owners liked the conservation neighborhood. Do you feel that way, or do you like living in a conservation neighborhood area?
I've got mixed emotions about it. I didn't really ever go along with the idea of putting commercial or industry interior, especially in our layout up there, because there's a lot of wetlands there. They're gonna have to disturb a lot of them, build a lot of bridges or whatever. I'm not against growth, you've got to have that. But when you start putting 25 houses per acre next to ours, we're on average of 2.5 acres lots. That makes it a little makes you wonder what's really gonna happen to the area.
Okay, I have no further questions.
Mr. West?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Dodson, thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, one of my witnesses is ill, so I just wanted to check with her and just make sure.
Sure.
Do you want to go?
This is,
I'm sorry, I'd like to call Danielle Oxenrider.
all right, and she is
She's the-
appearing as an expert.
Yes, sir.
All right, Ms. Oxenrider, can I raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're to give today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, sir.
And your full name, please.
Danielle Maria Sophia Oxenrider.
All right, please be seated.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, and thanks for coming in. I know you're not feeling well. If you could please state your name for the record?
Danielle Oxenrider.
Are you on the board for the Cottage Hill Waterworks? And if you are, what position do you hold?
I am, I'm the chairman of the board currently,
How long have you been on the board?
for 14 months.
So as chairman, what are your responsibilities for the water system?
I share a lot of my responsibilities with the other 6 members. We're a 7-member board. But as chairman, I run the meetings, I sign the big checks, and I do a lot of going out and getting experts to come in and speak to us and helping. We just started, we have an operations manager 3 months ago, which has been a great help because before then we kind of did it all. We were everything and anything, and now we have somebody in the office that's able to contact folks and do stuff, but I still have to sign off on any legal papers. I have to sign off on anything the board votes on as far as letters of availability. But we are run by a 7-member board. I am not the only person on the only decision maker for the board. The board.
Let me ask you a little more fundamental question.
Certainly, sir.
What exactly is the Cottage Hill Waterworks? Is it a potable water utility, or is
We
it
are.
a?
So ECUA is what the city and the dense majority of the county uses. But in, I think it was 1967, I don't really remember when our charter started, but years ago, there wasn't any availability for ECUA to pipe water out to our area. So local residents in our area, they went to Tallahassee and got a grant, and then they started our little water system. So we have a franchise with the county, an exclusive franchise with the county for the area that is written in our franchise, giving us rights to provide water to the people.
Potable water, not wastewater.
Just potable water. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So, Ms. Oxenrider, are you knowledgeable about any requests for new service from the local developers?
I am. That is one of the things that obviously we have to give them letters of availability, and we so yes, I am knowledgeable.
Were you able to read the analysis by Mr. Metcalf in his report?
Your Honor, may is she now qualified as an expert to, so it sounds like we're going into the opinion area, and I don't know that we've established her expertise.
I would agree. I mean, I haven't heard any questions that would ask for opinion testimony, so I haven't gotten to the point where I'd be accepting anything as expert testimony.
Okay.
But if it's
But
your
that's-
intention to
Yes, it is. I'm sorry, I
to
forgot
ask
do
those
that.
kind of questions, we probably really need to run through that process.
Okay. So, I'm not sure how to establish her. I would establish her as an expert in being the chairman. That's what I'm trying to establish.
Well, I don't know that that's an area of expertise. I think she can testify what what her duties and responsibilities are as the chairman, and if the Cottage Hill Waterworks has received applications for use, that she can testify to that. I don't know that that really needs expert testimony.
No.
Why don't you go ahead and ask her questions, and if we get into something that I would consider to be an expert in nature, or if Mr. West wants to throw in on it, then we can maybe explore it a little more. But this really sounds more like fact testimony to me.
Mostly it would be.
Okay, but
All right, in the report, Mr. Metcalf seemed to indicate that this area was growing slowly as far as development is concerned. Has that been your experience at the water system?
In the last 3 years, we've seen an explosion in our area. We have seen such an explosion that the citizens they're all members, so everybody that's on our water system is a member of our water system. So we're member owned and operated. The board comes out of the membership. So the people that we've never seen or heard from have come to board member meetings and expressed their concern about the growth and how, as a system, we are going to manage that growth. But there is a lot of concern about how many new developments are going into the area.
Ms. Oxenreider, did you come to the May Planning Board meeting and speak to the board about your concerns about this comp plan amendment?
I did.
Could you tell us what you told them, please?
I told them that we did not have the potable water availability for 2,500 homes. That at this time, actually, what we're doing, Your Honor, is
Objection, Your Honor, we're getting into the area where she's expressing some opinion on the capacity of the water system. I understand she's the chairman, but I mean, that's not necessarily the expertise that she needs to express opinions on capacities of the system or the hydrology of the area or whatever she's going to testify to.
well, right now, what I understand, Ms. Oxenreider.
someone that rides an oxen is an oxen rider.
I like
It took
it.
me a long
Okay.
time too, Your Honor.
I mean, it sounds as though this is what she advised the board during her testimony, and that I don't think is expert testimony. And I'll allow her to express, what she conveyed to the board on behalf of the association or on behalf of the waterworks is not, in my view, expert testimony. So I'm gonna, like I said, if we get into, and I think even the capacity of the system, if she's the chair, I think she can testify as a factual matter as to what capacity the utility has, but, so I'll overrule the objection. I don't know if you remember where you were in the question, but you were, I think, advising the board that you didn't have capacity to serve 2,500 homes, if that refreshes you.
That's basically what I did, Your Honor.
Ms. Oxenreider, did the county ever contact Cottage Hill before that May Planning Board meeting, or for the June transmittal hearing, or before the September adoption hearing about this amendment? Did
No,
they-
they did not.
I put in a public records request, which is, let's see, this is one of the ones that, exhibit number 3, I believe Mr. West objected to this. What I was trying to show here, Your Honor, was at what time Mr. Metcalf started the analysis. The amendment was passed September 22nd, 2022, and our deadline for exhibits was November 21st, just for perspective. And on Thursday, no, I'm sorry, even scroll down to the bottom of the email. On November 15th, Tuesday, November 15th, excuse me. That's when Mr. Metcalf was beginning his analysis or fact gathering for this amendment. So I wanted this in, as an exhibit to show the timeline.
Who is Lynn?
Lynn Mitchell is our operations manager.
May I ask which exhibit we're looking at here?
Exhibit 3,
Yeah, I believe it's page 3.
exhibit 3, page 3 of 4.
This is also one of the ones where we had an objection to the relevance.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to.
I'm going to overrule the objection, and I recognize if I were to accept this for the truth of the matter asserted, I would say it was hearsay, but it sounds as though this is being offered to show when Mr. Metcalf contacted the Cottage Hill Waterworks, and so that wouldn't necessarily be hearsay. I'll allow it. I mean, I think the document speaks for itself, but if you
Also-
want to have Ms. Oxenreider, Oschenreider, is that it?
Oxenreider, you had it right
Really,
the first time.
Oxenreider? Okay.
It's someone that rides an
Oxenreider.
oxen, isn't it? It's
Um,
German.
Also-
testify that as to who Lynn is and perhaps fill in some of the blanks, but I think the document itself speaks for itself, and I'll overrule the objection as to admissibility and receive Exhibit 3 in evidence.
And also, I would just like to say that I received this email. This was a public records request, so I printed it off of my email. So it is a public record from the water system. And you can see underneath that first, on page 1, you can see that I asked for any documents.
I've received it into evidence, so
Okay.
I think I have enough. I mean, it has the date sent and the date responses were sent. So for those purposes, I think we're good.
Okay,
So I will receive petitioner's Exhibit 3.
Thank you. Ms. Oxenreider, that date of November 15th, is that the first time that Cottage Hill Waterworks was contacted by anyone from the county about this comp plan amendment?
Yes, it was.
What information was Mr. Metcalf asking for? And was anything available to give to him at that time?
Unfortunately, we were not able to provide documents in such a short period of time. They had given us, or Mr. Metcalf had given us a week. Before we give out information, the board likes to review what we're sending out, and we did not have enough time to accommodate his requests.
How many wells is the Cottage Hill Waterworks water system operating with right now?
Right now, we have 2 wells in service. We have well 3 and well 4. Well 1 was taken off line due to mechanical issues. October 1st of 2021 is what our MORs state. So it's been off a little more than a year.
Okay, and what's the frequency of operation for the other 2? Do they go 24/7 or?
No, it's standard practice, or good practices, that a well be used for 10 hours a day to not burn the pump up.
Okay. So you have 2 wells in service running about 10 hours every day?
That they could. I couldn't say for certain that they are each day,
Sure.
but that's how much we would run them. Unless there was once one well went out and we had to, provide water for the others.
Do you have a water tower or something like that? Are you pumping water for storage? Because obviously people use water more than 10 hours a day. Are you pumping it into a storage facility and?
That is correct, sir. So,
Okay.
the well 3 has a little itty bitty water tower. It's kind of cute. It doesn't hold enough for this area, but when they applied for the grant, it was the only money that they would give us, because it had to service just the people that were applying for the grant back in 1967.
Okay.
And so that doesn't store as much. So well 4 is kind of our workhorse and has a large storage capacity.
Okay.
How many homes do you already have on the system?
As of Friday, we had 1,522, so plus or minus 2 or 3, I would assume.
And how many new homes has Cottage Hill Waterworks signed availability letters for?
Okay, so our letters of availability, we're, 14 months ago, we had a different board. The community had to get rid of the board and voted to, for a lot of reasons. But in that 14-month period, or before that 14 months, the chairman exclusively signed without consent of the rest of the board, all of our letters of availability. And since then, our board right now, we have approximately 1,230 new accounts that we are preparing for on our service. But since we took over, if you would, in March of this year of 2022, we have stopped signing any letters of availability to get some more information. As it's stated in Mr. Metcalf's plan, we have asked Baskerville Donovan to come out and do a hydraulic study, which will tell us exactly how much water we have, and what our options are as far as signing future letters of availability. Once I've signed a letter of availability as the chairman, we are thereby, under law, I've heard other companies have been sued, so we are agreeing that we will definitely provide that water, so we take this very seriously. We also are doing an asset plan with Florida Rural Water. Florida Rural Water is like they're through the state, and they help little water companies like ours. And this asset plan is going to tell us the condition of all of our equipment, including our pumps, which will also allow us to make better choices going forward for our company and our members.
So currently you have 1,522 current service connections
Correct, sir.
and 1,230 that, so if they build, if they all actually use the water that you've committed, you'll have 2,752 service connections
Correct.
currently accounted for.
Correct, and we do have people that have put in letters or requests for letters of availability, and since we took over, if you would, in March, we have not signed anything until we have more information. But as you see, our water system is very small at 1,522. 2,500 homes would be a huge burden for us.
All right, Ms. Oxenreider, in Mr. Metcalf's report, he wrote that if for any reason Cottage Hill Waterworks didn't have the ability to supply potable water to a new development on these properties, that ECUA could come in and take over the area and provide service. What is your understanding or Cottage Hill Waterworks' position on this?
Your Honor, I don't know what hearsay is. Can I speak to what my attorney told me? Is that, because I had the
I'm not
attorney-
gonna be able to do much with it, but,
Okay, because I had the
if,
attorney
if
review
there's something that,
what I've reviewed, because that's all I could do. I want to be able to give you the best information,
all
so.
right, go ahead and testify, and like I said,
Okay.
I'll weigh what I can use and what I
Absolutely.
can't use, but go ahead and,
Thank you.
and
Thank you, Your Honor.
give me your
I-
testimony.
I read our charter, which is in evidence, so you can read that as well, Your Honor. I don't,
That's in the Mr. Metcalf's report, or?
it's, no, I think it's your evidence that you guys presented. So you have a copy of our charter, and in our charter, it states that we have exclusive rights to the area that is ours. And that was signed over by the county commissioners. And we would not allow ECUA to come in and provide service. That is not something that they would be able to do without our consent.
Okay, I'm not sure if this would be a question that might stray over into the expert part, but I'm gonna ask it and you can tell me, Your Honor. Did you read the calculations that Mr. Metcalf put in his report? And did you think they were accurate?
I did read, his evaluations in the last report that, on the 30th, and Mr. Metcalf did not have the correct number of wells that we're running. And
The
I'm
correct
not-
number of what?
wells. He
Okay.
has it listed that we're running 3 wells. And it's just well number 1. Mr. Dobson in the back, Dodson, excuse me. Mr. Bill Dodson was the chairman of the board and was on the board for 20 years for the water company. And he was on the board, actually, he just retired December 1st. But he has advised us that it's probably not a good financial decision to try to bring well 1 back on, due to how much water it does give us and the problems that it's having. So the board has decided not to bring well 1 back on. So I would state that that would probably be the biggest reason for the numbers not being correct.
And if this change is going from taking the 99.45 acres, preserving half of it in the conservation neighborhood, and taking the other half at 3 houses per acre, to a future land use of mixed-use suburban that would allow 25 houses per acre. So when I do the math, 99.45 acres times 25 dwelling units, that would be 2,486 homes. Do you think at this time that Cottage Hill Water Works has the capacity to supply that number of homes?
It's not a matter of what I think, honestly, it's a matter of what our water operators and what, what I've been told and what I have seen, and we do not have the availability for those amount of homes. And I would state that this is what makes my job very difficult, is we're trying to plan for our company, and when we're given the parameters of what each parcel is allowed to build on, and we're trying to say, okay, we're gonna have possibly 100 homes going here. And this isn't the first property that's done this to us. We have other properties that have been removed from the sector plan, and we've had to take on more homes. It just makes it very difficult for us as a water company that wants to provide for whomever is coming into our community. It's not that we don't want to provide service to this piece of property. We do, but we have to plan for it, and the planning now states that it's supposed to be 3 homes, and now we're going to, it's not something that we were able to plan for. So if going forward, that is something we need to plan for, if the count, thank you, I'll just leave it at that.
So have there been other properties that have opted out of the sector plan that are also in your water system?
Yes,
Franchise area?
there's the Pine Top subdivision, which is off a well line in Pine Top. There's the property there on Knollwood. They're at the end of Knollwood and Neal, and then on Neal Road further north towards 29, there's the property there. And as everybody else butchers my name, I feel that I'm going to butcher these people's name, and I apologize, but it's like the Zachaloulis property, and they are one of the properties that are actually waiting for us to sign a water letter of availability. So as soon as we get these studies back, they'll be the ones that we'll be signing off on first.
So was that an increase in density from the previous conservation neighborhood, 3 houses per acre?
Yes, it was.
Do you know if there's of any developments in the sector plan area that have also asked for service?
Oh, I have that's what this box is for. I brought with me all the different properties that, wait, ask that question again, I'm sorry.
Is there any properties that are in the sector plan that have asked for service? Are you familiar with the Woodland Hills development?
Yes, Woodland Hills has, thank you, yeah, I have Woodland Hills in here. I don't really off the top of my head, I can't think of
That's fine.
every one of them. But yes, I do have Woodland Hills, and they have 316 lots that they've asked for.
Okay, that's all the questions I have, Your Honor.
Mr. West?
Thank you, Your Honor.
Give me 1 second, I'm gonna close this door. I keep hearing this, didn't realize there's an exit door here.
Sure.
That keeps banging. So give me one. All right, go ahead.
You, and I'm referring to you as Cottage Hill, don't take it personally, but you, Cottage Hill, has the obligation to provide water service within your franchise area, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Could you pull up exhibit number 6, please? Okay, yeah. Petitioner's exhibit, if I can. It's already been exhibited, or entered into evidence.
Yep.
Okay, that's it. And then maybe scroll forward to paragraph 6 and 7 on pages 191, Bates number 191 and 192. All right. And if you could take us just a minute to look at that paragraph at the bottom of the page.
So this, okay, I'm sorry, so this is not petitioner 6, this is county 6.
I'm sorry, I said petitioner, county 6. So you would agree that you have the obligation, Cottage Hill, to provide water service within your franchise area?
We do.
Okay. Do you realize your franchise can be terminated or even limited or terminated if you can't?
I understand that if the county commissioners wish to do that, then they would have to buy our company out as far as purchasing the membership back from everybody.
Let me ask you to look at paragraph 7, which is on the next top of the next page, and you can kind of scroll down there and look at the bottom. The language I'm focusing on is the second to last line, which allows the board to restrict, limit, or terminate your franchise. And the preceding sentences, discuss if there's any concerns anybody has with your ability to provide service.
I don't understand what you're alluding to.
Is there a question?
The question is, you understand that your franchise can be restricted, limited, or terminated if you are not able to fulfill the obligations you have under the franchise agreement.
That is not how I read that, and that is not how I read
Okay.
our charter.
Assuming that there was a restriction, limitation, or termination of your franchise, what would be the default water service in the county?
That would depend on who the county commissioners would want to give it to. It wouldn't necessarily go to ECUA, but
Yeah.
is that what
I
you're,
object to that question.
is that
How
what you're
would-
alluding to? Because
I think it may be,
to
Maybe a
leave.
little speculative for this witness to testify as to who the county may select. I presume it would probably be ECUA, but I don't know, having not seen the county code with regard to utility service,
We have the
I assume there's
ECUA
a
Act.
document out there that will.
We have the ECUA Act as part of our exhibits, so I'll leave it at that.
All right, and
But
the-
should-
obviously, the ECUA Act and this charter will both speak for themselves, and to whatever extent that I need to make a finding, I can make it, I think, based on the language of the documents. Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, after reading this, obviously I was concerned for our company. Mr. Metcalf's, I don't know whether you call it proposal or I don't know what this is called, but after reading it, I was concerned. And I did contact the director of ECUA, Mr. Woody, and I did talk to him at length about this situation. And I am correct in speaking with him that he reads the charter the same way I do.
Well, I'll read the charter and
And that's fi- that's
I'll
fine,
read
Your Honor.
whatever I need to read and draw whatever conclusions I
Absolutely,
need to
Your
draw, and what discussions you may have had with Mr.
Absolutely.
Woody are probably beyond what I can consider.
Absolutely, Your Honor. I understand.
Okay. Mr. West, go ahead.
Ms. Oxenreider, your testimony before the planning board, I think you indicated that you had concerns about funding for additional infrastructure?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. You indicated, though, that you would like another well?
We obviously see the need. We see that there's, like I said, there's been an explosion in our area, and so that is why we're doing the hydraulic study and the asset plan. So we are trying to secure these plans so that we can then turn around and go try to get funding from the USDA or I forget who the other company is, but we are going to try to we're growing with the area, but we have to do it in a manner that
If you had funding, you would expand?
if we had the funding tomorrow, absolutely we would build tomorrow.
Do you have property identified for a new well?
We do.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
So you're willing,
Was
I
that a
think your
yes or
test,
no?
I'm sorry, sir?
Was that a yes or a no?
That was a yes, sir. We
Okay.
do.
so your testimony before the planning board was you were willing to work with you. I assume that would be either the county, correct?
Work with, I'm sorry.
Well, you had your testimony was I am willing to work with you before the planning board. I want to make sure who I'm assuming the you is, either the county or some developer of that property.
Can you give me the rest of that sentence so I can tell you I don't know the rest of the sentence, so.
It says, I am willing to work with you on, and then I can't the transcript didn't copy well, but I can't get it all at once. I don't, again, this is not an evidence, this is just my notes from your testimony before the planning board.
We want to work with the county, we want to work with the developers. We know that development's coming. We're not trying to put a stop here now to any of this, but we are not prepared for 2,500 homes.
Does all the communication that comes to Cottage Hill Waterworks come through you?
All the communication goes through our operations manager, and the operations manager then filters it to the board. So the board would then get what's filtered.
So not all of the
Sergeant Leonard, If
communication,
you could speak up a little bit
Oh, I'm
and
sorry.
make sure you.
I'm
yeah.
very loud, so I was trying to not
No, be
blow your
loud.
ears out.
Be loud, be proud.
Okay, thank you.
so when you said, you testified earlier that the county didn't contact Cottage Hill,
Mhm.
you wouldn't necessarily know whether they did or not, because not all the communications come through you.
All the communications go to one email address, which is operations, and I have access to all of those emails. So I go through there pretty regularly to make sure that my staff hasn't missed something. I'm responsible at the end of the day to make sure that we're disseminating this information to not only all the staff, but the board as well. So we need to know what's going on. So I have to know, so I do regularly go through and see what is being emailed or what's being sent, whether it's, and letters get scanned into our system. So we have access to all of that. So I do see all the information that's coming in.
Do you regularly have to submit annual reports to the county on the status of your infrastructure?
We submit regular reports to the Department of Environmental Protection, but as far as to the county as to, you're asking to, say that again, I'm sorry, what are you asking for?
Well, as the franchisee, do you have an obligation to provide information to the franchisor on your capacities?
We have not been asked, like, not that I know of.
That's not my question. My
I
question is, do you have an obligation to provide that information to the franchisor?
I would have to defer on that. I've been there for a year.
Okay.
I don't know if that's been, I don't know if that's something that we do, so I would have to defer.
Understood. Did you receive a public records request from Mr. Metcalf?
No.
Okay. Who did you gave some testimony earlier about a public records request. I thought I heard you said that was from Mr. Metcalf.
That was me.
That was from you. Okay. So you didn't receive any public records request from Mr. Metcalf?
Mr. Metcalf, you saw the email that he sent to our operations director, and that was asking for information about the system. Understand that our board, there was a reason that the citizens removed the previous board, so a lot of the records from before that time are not correct. So we went and we contacted an attorney, and we now have a public records request, and so we take those things very seriously. But the records that Mr. Metcalf was asking for wasn't anything that we had documentation. There weren't any reports that we could give to him that weren't dated. So that's why the board, we didn't have anything at that time that was what he was asking for.
So you didn't get that public records request yourself?
It's what he turned in wasn't a public records request. He was asking for some information, but it wasn't. It was asking for some different information. It was sent to the office and our office manager, and then she sent it to me.
Do you know if that information was provided to Mr. Metcalf?
We could not do it within the 4 or 5 days that we had, so no, at that time it was not.
No further questions.
Ms. Rogers, anything further from Ms. Oxenreider?
Ms. Oxenreider, who is the commissioner for, in your service area?
Stephen Barry?
Have you ever spoken with Commissioner Barry about, the county taking over your water system?
I did.
And what was he interested in taking over your water system?
He was not. At the time, Your Honor, when the previous board was taking care of the water system, they allowed our sanitation survey, which is through Florida DEP and our Northwest Florida Water Management District, permit to lapse for 2 years. And so I contacted the community and let the community know what was going on. I contacted Stephen Barry, as he is our district, our county commissioner for our area, and let him know what was going on, and asked if they would be interested in stepping in and taking over our charter, as we were having some issues. And I was told by Mr. Barry that they are not, because we're solvent. We have plenty of money in the bank, and that they would not interfere with our charter so long as we were solvent.
Ms. Oxenreider, have you ever spoken, I believe you said you've spoken with the director of the Emerald Coast Utilities Authority, or ECUA, about his desire, if he had a desire to take over Cottage Hill Waterworks?
I did, but Your Honor, is that hearsay? I don't want to get in trouble.
I don't think Ms. Oxenreider's, was it Mr. Wiley?
Mhm.
His name, or
Woody, very close.
Mr. Woody.
Bruce
I think
Woody, yeah.
conversations between those two people, I don't see how I can do anything or use any of that testimony.
The only what I was trying to show was just because it can happen doesn't mean the county wants to or the ECUA wants to. But
Well,
I'll leave it there.
I'll evaluate what the, you know, to the extent that I'm asked, I'll evaluate the various documents and figure out to the best of my ability what can and can't be done.
Okay, I have no further questions then, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Oxenreider, thank you. Hope you get to feeling better.
Thank you, I appreciate your honor.
All right, let's go off the record for a second. So I show it as 12:10. I don't know what your pleasure is in terms of lunch.
I'm happy to continue.
I'm happy to, I typically don't eat lunch when I'm in hearing. It keeps me surly and irritable, so. But if y'all, I understand a lot, you know, people have to eat, so if you want to have a short lunch break, I don't know what's around here or that's quick. If you want to have a short lunch break, I don't want to stretch it out too much. I'd like to go as quickly as we can. Ms. Odom, I don't know what your pleasure is, if you'd like to have something to eat. Okay. Okay.
That's fine with me,
What
too.
y'all's pleasure? You just want a short, grab a snack kind of lunch?
I'm fine. Anything would be fine with me. I'm like you, I don't eat lunch most days.
Okay. Ms.
Yeah, that-
Rogers?
That's fine with me too,
All
just
right.
a short break.
All right, so it is currently 12:11. So why don't we go 19 minutes? We'll come back at 12:30. All right, thank you.